Hello, everyone. I'm assuming everybody can hear me because I can't see or hear you, but I'm going to trust that everything's happening the way it should. If you want to chat in, that'd be great. And let me know who's here so I can see who's joined me, and if you want, just kind of maybe where you're from as well. That'd be great as well. Going to the Q&A here. Okay, so. All right, so as long as you can see my screen, we're going to be good to go here then. We are going to be talking about managing data recovery in SharePoint, and that's going to involve a conversation about mostly on-prem, but I will actually have interjected in my slides some information regarding SharePoint Online as well. So the first thing I want to do is have you mark your calendars for the now renamed SharePoint Conference to the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference, March 23rd through the 25th, 2021 in the MGM Grand Resort in beautiful Las Vegas. These are the sponsors that are making this all possible for us. So be sure if you see any of them, or if you're looking for any assistance in the SharePoint or Microsoft 365 space, that you reach out to them for anything that you might need any assistance with. We are going to have a raffle, so you want to make sure that you use the bit.ly right there on the bottom left-hand side, and just follow along on that and go ahead and provide some information regarding the responses there to get you qualified for that raffle. And then we also, part of the funds that we are raising are going to be going towards the GoFundMe page here, as you can see here. And this will give you information regarding that as well. Well, let me introduce myself here. I'm Brian Alderman. I'm based in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm a consultant and trainer at my own company called MicroTechPoint. I'm an author of 4 published Microsoft technology books. I'm also an MVP, as you can see on the right-hand side. I focus primarily on Microsoft 365, Office 365, SharePoint on-prem and online, as well as SQL Server. And I have 2 courses, actually about 16 courses, but 2 exam-related paths on Pluralsight. So if you're looking for one of your certifications regarding Microsoft 365, the MS100 or the MS101, please feel free to check those out. I like to have fun when I'm out and about, and normally I do live presentations in front of peeps. So these are some of the suits I've worn over the past couple years is when I tried this. But not going to be doing that until we get back in front of people. But just to show you that I do enjoy having some fun. So our agenda for today is to be talking about, like I said, SharePoint backups. So I'm going to first begin by introducing the components. We'll also talk about some tools. I'll go into a demo on your end user recovery tools. Then we're going to have a little more information about the backup and recovery within SharePoint, and then I'll do a demo on that as well. We have avoiding what are called ginormous transaction logs. You've probably seen this if you're working with SQL Server at all on-prem. You get these huge transaction logs. We're going to talk to how that happens and why that happens. And then most likely in this shortened format that we have here, normally this is a 75-minute presentation. There's high availability. I won't be speaking to that most likely today because of lack of time, but I do have the slides if you want to see those. Now, when we talk about SharePoint, we talk about a SharePoint farm. This is a SharePoint 2013 farm. And as you can see, when we're on-prem, we're responsible for SQL Server. We're responsible for application pools, service applications, web applications, building out the web applications. You add site collections. And then we get down to the users level where you have subsites, lists, libraries, items, and documents. And we look at that 2013 and you compare it to 2016 or 2019, really the only thing that changed was during the installation, we have min roles. And the min roles allow us to dedicate servers on-prem to perform specific tasks. So with that said, when we're looking at end user or data recovery, we have to look at a couple different ways. We have to look at it from the end user's perspective, subsites, lists, libraries, items, and documents. And then we can look at it from a site collections level, which is the tier above the end users or the site owners. And then if you're a farm administrator, you look at everything when you're on-prem. The SQL Server, which is your config database, your central admin database, your service app databases, and all your web app databases. So when you're working on-prem, you have all of this to be taken into consideration. But when you're online, you really just have to focus on the site collection and the subsites. The service apps, the web apps, the databases are all taken care of by Microsoft. So I'm going to begin by talking about what we can use for data recovery tools from an end user's perspective first. First off, we have recycle bins and versioning that we will discuss in more detail. Then we go up to the farm level. We have SharePoint backups and restores. And in there, we can manage those through central admin. We can use PowerShell. And if you're way back in the good old days, if you still like STS-ADM, you can certainly use that. It's deprecated, but it's still hanging it out there. If you are talking with your DBA, which you should be quite frequently, they are also responsible for performing database backups and restores. So they'll be doing that in addition to what you're doing within the SharePoint space. And if the tools that we have out of the box provided by Microsoft don't provide you everything that you're looking for, we also have third-party backup and restore tools. I'll be introducing them real quickly so you can reach out to any of them if you want some additional information. So first off, from an end user, we have a first stage site recycle bin where you can recover lists and libraries, items and documents from that, as an end user, from that recycle bin. We also have what's called a second stage site collection recycle bin, which are site collection admin controls. This also can contain list, libraries, items and documents. But in addition, it can contain subsites. So if I accidentally go in and delete a subsite, I can reach out to my site collection admin and ask them to restore that. So this is a way for us to perform recoveries from an end user's perspective, whether it be list, libraries, items, documents, and even down to subsites. Another flavor that we want to turn on, or feature that we want to work with, is versioning, because this allows my users to collaborate on documents. And while they're collaborating on documents, we may have a document created, we'll say May 25th. We really liked it, but we decided to tweak it some more. If we have some versioning turned on, we can actually go back to May 25th and restore that and make that the most current version. So we can do that with the installation or enabling or activation of versioning. So I'm just going to step out, take a look at how this will work for us. So we're going to go into our VMware space here, and we're going to hear that we have I've got SharePoint 2016 running here, and you're going to see my landing page for my MTP portal. And we have two document libraries. We have the clientele, which has clients and customers, and we have vendors, which has contractors and vendors in there. So what I'll do is I'll go into, let's go into vendors. We'll go directly into that library, and then we'll go to the library settings up on the classic interface. And on the left-hand side, we have the general settings and we have the versioning settings. Now, if you create a document library, by default, it's going to enable major versions for you, and that's it. Nothing to do with major or minor. So this is where it allows me to create a version. It's version 1, and someone comes in and makes a change. Instead of clobbering version 1, it's going to create version 2, and then version 3, version 4, all the way up to 50,000. You'll see the default setting, though, is only to allow you to create 500 major versions. So by default, it's only going to allow you to create 500 major versions. In addition to major versions, we can create major and minor or draft versions. So for each one of these major versions, we can have 511 minor versions. I'm going to set this to say I don't want that many. I only want 25 minor versions. So now when I go in and create my major version 1, someone makes a modification, it's going to be a 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, all the way up to 1.25. So by educating your users on how to use versioning, it's going to reduce the number of times they have to go to the help desk and say, look, I made a change to a document. How could you help me recover that document? I need to roll back to May 25th. Well, if you have versioning turned on, and more importantly, if you educated your users, they can roll back themselves because they're going to have up to 500 major versions by default and 25 flavors, up to 25 flavors of minor versions as well. So let me say that a little bit differently. What this is saying is actually instead is of the 500 major versions, the last 25, so 476, 477, all the way up through 500, keep all of the minor, and you can have 511 minors. So if you have your major versions here set to 500, and then you have this set to 25, 400 major version 476 through major version 500 are going to have any number of minor versions. So make sure you educate your users on the use of versioning. Let's go back to our vendors document library here. And we're going to go back into, I want to show you how the recycle bin works for your end users. So I'm going to go to, let's just drill into contractors here. And we're going to go into contractor number 1. And I'm going to go to ellipses here. And I'm going to go ahead and do a delete. And it's saying, look, are you sure you want to send these items to the site recycle bin? Remember I said we had 2 flavors or 2 levels of recycle bins. We have our site level or our user level, and then we have our secondary or our site collection. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK on this. And I'm going to delete contractor number 1, and notice that's toast. Now, if I'm an end user, I can be happy with that. And that's going to hang out there for a period of time. But I can come out here, and I can go to the recycle bin. Here, this is the site recycle bin, and here's my contractor right here. So I can easily click on this and then restore that back. So this is helpful again. This is all about educating your end users to let them know. In addition to versioning, we can allow you to roll back. If you accidentally delete something, or maybe you intentionally delete something, and then 10 days later you need to go recover that, you can do so by going to your site recycle bin. Now, if I go up here after I've selected this in my site recycle bin and I hit delete the selection, it's now saying, are you sure you want to remove this from the end user's recycle bin? I'm going to go ahead and do an OK, and now it's gone. So now at this point, a normal end user will not be able to recover this. But remember I said we have our second stage recycle bin. So if I go to the gear up here in the top right hand side and I go to site settings and I scroll down to my site collection administration, here's my recycle bin, and I'll click on that. When you first come in here, you're going to see a view here of everything that's in the user's recycle bins. But I want to see what's been deleted out of my user's recycle bins. So I'm going to click on this option here called the second stage recycle bin, and here's my option or my document called contractor 1. I'll click on that, and then I'll click restore. It's not going to restore it back to their recycle bin. It's actually going to bring it right back to their library that it was deleted from. So I'll go ahead and do an OK on that. I'll go back to my vendors, go back to my contractors, and there you have the contractor 1 is now back to where it was initially. Notice the date didn't change. Nothing changes with this when you are restoring it from your recycle bin. So that's the end user's piece where you can educate them on versioning and educate them on the use of the site recycle bin as well as the second stage recycle bin, which is the site collection administrator's responsibility. So as we move into, we're going to talk about now some of the SharePoint backup tools we have. We have 3 flavors of backup tools that we can use. We can use Central Admin, which is our GUI. We can use PowerShell. Now to back up my entire farm, or a service app, or a web app, or a content database, I can use PowerShell, and I can use the command backup-sp farm, and I provide the appropriate switch, service app, web app, or content database. To back up the configuration database, I can use a separate PowerShell command, backup-sp configuration database. If I want to back up a site collection, whenever you're working with PowerShell, if you see the word site in there, that's a site collection that you're working with, not a subsite. If you see the SP web in there, now you're working with subsites, you're working with lists, you're working with document libraries. So if I want to manage the backups using PowerShell, it's really 4 different commands: backup-sp farm, and any component of the farm can be backed up. Backup-sp configuration database for just a config database, backup sp site for your site collection, and then export. Notice we switch from backup to export for your subsites, your list, and your document libraries. If I want to retrieve any information about these backups that I've completed, I can use the PowerShell command of get-sp deleted site. If you're if you're online, SharePoint Online, you'll use the same command. You'll use the get-spo for online deleted site, because what happens up there, it actually does a soft delete. It's actually going to hang out in a site collection recycle bin in SharePoint Online for 93 days. So up to 93 days after I delete a site collection in SharePoint Online, I can go back to this recycle bin that's at the SharePoint Online admin level and restore that, because it's only done a soft level site collection deletion. So be aware of that. So really, to manage my on-prem information, I know to back them up, I only need 4 PowerShell commands. The 4 are listed here. And if I want to get information, that's that 5th one of get-sp deleted site. Now, in addition, if you have scripts that are out there from 2007, 2010, 2013 of STS-ADM, They're still cranking out there STSADM-O for operations, and you can do a backup. Or when you get down to the subsites, the list, and the document libraries, that backup command will change to an export command. So you don't have to retire those STSADM scripts yet. However, I strongly suggest that you do so because PowerShell is just outstanding to use, to know, because it's versatile across multiple products. What about restores? Again, we can do a restore in central admin. Often I'll see people write a PowerShell script to perform a backup because they want to schedule that backup. I can't schedule any backups or restores from inside of central admin. So I can mix and match these tools. I can perform a PowerShell backup of my entire farm and then restore it using central admin. Now, similar to doing a backup, I can also do a restore using PowerShell. Now we have just 3 commands here. We have the restore-sp farm, which is going to restore the entire farm, our web and service applications, our content databases. And instead of having a separate command to do a restore, if I want to restore that configuration database, I'm going to do a restore-sp farm -configuration only, specify the URL of that configuration database, and it will restore that configuration database only. So I lose a PowerShell command when it comes to the restore capabilities. So it's a total of 7 PowerShell commands you need to know to automate the backup of your SharePoint farm, your web or service apps, any individual content databases, site collections, subsites, lists, and document libraries. 7 PowerShell commands is all you need to perform or to automate your backups and restores of your SharePoint content. Similar to doing a backup, you can also do a restore-sp deleted site or restore-spo deleted site. Think for the restore tools. In addition, we have STSADM. I won't leave it out just because I think I checked with a group, well, probably one of the last times I spoke in public, which is a few months back, and some people were still using STSADM. So for those of you that are hanging on to that dear command line option, you still can use that. Instead of backup and export, we're going to do a restore and import. So there's some options that we have when it comes to SharePoint restore tools. Let's take a look at working with a central admin for performing a backup here. So let's jump back up to my images here, and we'll go over to central admin, and we have a whole category here called backup and restore. So I'm going to open that up, and you can see it's broken up into the granular backups, the lower section, and then the farm backup and restore. So we're going to go in and take a look at performing a backup. We're not actually going to do it because of the amount of time, and like I said, I'm running these images here, and it kind of brings my machine to a halt if I do so. But I want to show you what we can do inside of central admin. First, when you come in, you get some review information. No backup or restore is in progress, or there's timer services running and the administration service is running. But if I scroll down, this is a pet peeve of mine with SharePoint, has been since 2007 when I first broke into the SharePoint space. Before that, I was pretty much all SQL Server. Found out we can use a SQL Server heavily with SharePoint, so it got me into SharePoint, not knowing it's going to consume my life, but it's been a good consumption. Now, normally if you're in a Microsoft product and you have a checkbox, what does that mean? If you go into any other product and you go into list or a library and it's showing a checkbox, that normally means you can choose multiple items. So let's say I want to come in here and I want to back up my MTP content type hub. Let me scroll down. And I want to back up my MTP portal. Oops, can't do that. Wait a minute. Okay, I'll do my MTP portal and my MTP my sites. Oops, can't do that. You get one click in here, folks. One click only. So even though it's showing checkbox, which normally in most every other Microsoft product, that means we can back up multiple items or choose multiple items. We're not able to do that here. So just be aware of that. It's a little pet peeve of mine, but I'm pretty much through many years of counseling gotten through that. So let's say we want to back up my MTP portal. We can expand on that because I clicked the upper tier of this 2-tier, 3-tier, if you include the timer jobs. It's going to select every item within there, within that MTP portal. That's just that one database. We'll come down, we'll do a next. And now it's telling me, okay, back up the following component. Do you want to do a full or a differential backup? We're going to talk more about those in a minute. And what's your backup location? Because I've already performed a backup, it's going to, by default, send it to my separate drive called m:/SQL data. Now, like I said, if I want to complete this backup or have this backup kick off, I could just click Start Backup right now, and that would initiate this backup. Instead, I'm going to cancel this because, like I said, because of the amount of time, and it actually drags my Surface Pro. I get the top of the line Surface Pro, but you get 2 or 3 VMware images up there and it kind of brings it to a halt. So I'm going to cancel that, and I'm going to go back to our backup and restore settings, and now I'm going to go to restore from a backup. Now, as you can see, I've done some backup, so we have options. Here's my radio buttons. That's all I want to see, because when you're going to do a restore, you're not going to restore 2 or 3 items in a row. You're going to restore one at a time. So unlike the other interface where it has checkboxes that shouldn't be there, I said I'm almost over it. I didn't say I was completely over it. I could then come in here now and choose to do a full restore here. And I could click next. Try it again. And notice it's going into the backup directory, so it's actually getting this information from the backup directory location. I'm not quite sure why it's not moving on for me here. Okay, well, I would click next. So in here, 2 things I wanted to point out to you. First, it has the proper radio buttons, because if you're going to do a restore, you're going to do a full restore first, and then you would do your differentials after that. So I would come in here, I'd click my full restore. If you expand on this, you'll see what items are involved in there and the information about it. Here it goes. Okay, finally came in, and it gives me information regarding the restore. So that's how it could perform a backup and restore from inside of Central Admin. Now, some other options in there. Configure your backup settings. And here, when you come in here, if you don't already have this populated, if you know your restores are going to go into the m:/SQL data directory, you can pre-populate that, which means every time you do a backup or a restore, it's going to know to go to that directory to find the information it needs to find regarding or the location for those backups and for those restores. The other thing we can do is expedite the restores or the backups. If your system's down and you got 5,000 people waiting for your servers to come back up, your SharePoint farm to come back up, if nobody's using it because they're waiting for a dedicated, keyword is dedicated server, what it's going to do is it's going to use 3 threads to perform the backup, and it's going to use 3 threads by default to perform the restore. Well, if I've got 60 gigabytes of information, it's going to use 3 threads to back up or restore. That means it's 20 gigs per thread. 20 times 3 is 60. But if I want to expedite and speed that up, and we have the processors that can handle this, most of them can nowadays, we could change this to 6. So now it's going to write 6 times as fast. Now it's going to write 2 times as fast, because instead of writing using 3 threads, it's going to write using 6 threads. Same with the restore. If your system's already down, the server's dedicated to SharePoint, so it's not going to affect anything else. You could change this restore thread to 6. Now it should write that, roughly in half the time, because we're going to be writing 2 times as much data. So these are some of the configuration settings that you have when it comes in to the SharePoint Online space. We can view backup and restore history. If you want to just peek at what's happened, you can see what's been backed up and what's been restored. That's another option. And then you can check the status. Now, if we go into our second category to perform a more granular backup, we can perform a site collection backup. And I'll just click on that. It's going to choose the site collection based on your web application. So the first thing we need to do is make sure we change the site collection. It's really based on the web app. So I'm going to go up to the right-hand side web application, change it from the MTCP hub. That's your content type hub. Change it to my MTP portal. Here's my different site collection. So I can say, let's say I want to grab publishing. Yes, and when you do so in here, this information is updated here. I only have one content database, but if I had multiple content databases and I don't know which content database contains the site collection, I can click on the site collections and it'll tell me which content database is stored in. So that's another thing for viewing information about your site collections. And this / is your root site collection. So we'll just go to publishing. I'm not going to actually execute, and we'll go ahead and do an OK. And then we can specify the file name. So specify the destination for the backup package. So we'll just say the publishing, and I can spell publishing backup. And it's by default, it's going to put it in the location that we've already specified. It's going to use the .bak file extension. So if I kick that off now, that's how it would start the backup of a site collection. Let me go ahead and cancel this. Remember, we talked about the idea of PowerShell having the same options. Now we're changing from a backup to export a site or list. So in here, I can do the same thing. Here's my MTP portal, MicroTechPoint sites publishing, because that's the last I worked with. I can drill down and change the site. And it's just the root level site. So we'll leave that one there. And then I can further drill down and change the list. And from in here, I can grab a specific list or library. So we'll grab let's grab our document library and do an OK here. And that's going to be able to do a backup of that. Now, instead of a .bak file, notice the default extension is a .cmp file. So I will call it documents export.cmp. If there's a file already out there, you can overwrite the existing file. The beautiest thing about doing this at this level, we can export the security associated with this document library or the subsite or the list. And if we have versioning turned on, as we already discussed, I can say, I don't want all 500 or 5,000 versions. I want just the last major, or I want just the current version, or I want the last major and last minor. So we can specify exactly what we want to back up when we're using this GUI. By the way, all this can be done with PowerShell as well with specific switches. You just have to be aware of those switches for doing so. Now, what if I want to recover data from an unattached content database? What is an unattached content database? Let's say at the end of June, the finance department does all their yearly fiscal year reports, and they said, okay, I'm done. We're into August. We're into September now. I won't need these anymore. So we kind of take them databases offline that contains the information for the previous fiscal year. Coming to January, February, the following year, there's like, you know what, there's a document I need to get out of there. What we can do is we can reach out to our DBA. The DBA can locate that database. They should have this all documented, so they should know where it is. They'll locate that database, and it doesn't even have to go back to the database server that's hosting SharePoint. That's the beauty of this thing. It's not. That's why it's called an unattached content database. It's not attached to the SQL Server. It's not attached to the SharePoint farm. In fact, this could be SQL Server Express as long as the database is less than, I think it's 10 gigabytes. I think is the size. So SQL Server Express is a free version. So I could restore that to any database server, any SQL server, including SQL Server Express, specify the database name, specify the authentication method, whether it be Windows or SQL, and then I can browse the information. If the finance or the CFO says, I need this document, and I'm pretty sure it was in this library called 2018 fiscal budget or something like that. We can browse the content, we can back up a site collection, or we can export a site or list. So I can get down to the site or the list or library level because this was a document, but I can't get down to a specific document. I would have to export the entire library. Then we could make that library available to the CFO, and then they could grab the document that they're looking for. So this is our more granular operations that we can perform through central admin. And this last one is where you would check your status of that information. So those are some items regarding full farm backups, whether you use central admin, PowerShell, good old STS-ADM, or a mishmash of those, because you don't have to use one tool to decide what you're going to do. All right, what about Azure? We have Azure Backups. So we have Azure Backup, which is very nice to use. It's Azure-based service. It backs up to what's called the Recovery Services Vault. And in here, we have different components. We have the Azure Backup Agent, called Mars, System Center Data Protection Manager. We have a Azure Backup Server, and we have an Azure IaaS VM Backup. So we have all of these options available to us for performing backups. A lot of people will back up by default SQL Server, by the way. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. By default, if you install SQL Server, you do what I call a spousal installation for any product, but SQL Server. Spousal installation is when you sit there, you run setup.exe, and kind of like you do with your spouse, you say, okay, 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 okay. You do that through the wizard, you're doing a spousal installation. If you do that with SQL Server, your database files, which are MDF files, are stored on the C drive. Your log files, which means all of your changes, are stored on the C drive. Oh, by the way, your backups that you're going to be performing, guess where they're stored? You got it, on the C drive. That is a horrible, implementation, but it's the default settings. If a DBA doesn't know that, or if someone said, hey, Brian, why don't you take care of SharePoint for me, and I just run a spousal installation of SQL Server, and I start doing backups, and thinking I'm protecting my data, and then we lose the C drive, we've lost our MDF, we've lost our transactions, and we've also lost our backups. So be very, very aware of that. So Azure is a safe place for you to back up content to the cloud, and it can be easily done using these products here. Now, the Azure Backup options that you have, but that we just introduced in the previous slide, you have the Azure Backup Agent, and you can see what it does for you. The agent provides recovery services vault, compression and recovery services vault. You can perform incremental backups. If you go over to the last column, you see that Azure IaaS VM has the recovery services vault and has the incremental backups. And you got a little legend on the bottom with the big green means it's supported, somewhat supported for disk duplication, as you can see towards the bottom. And if you don't see any type of icon in there, that means it's not supported. That particular feature is not available in that option. This is also another table that expands on what you're going to get when you're using your Azure Backup Agent versus the System Center DPM versus just performing the Azure Backup Server versus an Azure IaaS VM backup. I'm not going to read all these to you, but you can see there's retention options, there's backup frequency, there's recovery points on local disk or on tape. So these are some considerations that you'll want to think about when you're trying to decide what's going to be your best backup option. Now, third-party SharePoint backup tools, these are not in any specific order by any means, but if you're looking for some assistance because what is offered by Microsoft just isn't cutting it for you, you want some more specific point solutions is what we have here. AvePoint, Idera, Quest Software, Veritas has one that's not point solutions, but these are just an example of some third-party software that's out there that you could also use for backups and restores of your SharePoint data. Now the SQL Server backups restores, because like I said, if every DBA that I've ever met, and they should be rightfully so, ultimately, if you're the DBA, you're responsible for all of the information. Now, if I say I'm the SharePoint Farm Administrator, dude, I got this covered, and the DBA says, okay, if you got it covered, I'm not going to do backups. That's what I call an RPE for the DBA. An RPE is a resume producing event, because ultimately a DBA is responsible for the data. I don't care what manager or what admin it says comes over to me as the DBA and says, oh, dude, don't worry about it. I got this covered. It's not covered. It's your job to make sure those databases are easily recoverable. Regardless of what they're doing, SharePoint in this case, regardless of what the SharePoint Farm admin is doing, your DBA is most likely going to be doing those backups as well. And they can back up the Farm config database, the central admin database, your service and web app databases. So they can perform these backups. They can also go out and schedule backups. There's actually a wizard called the SQL Server Database Maintenance Wizard. If you're one of the people that threw up your hands that hurt and said, when someone said, hey, I need someone to create it, to manage SharePoint. You threw up your hand because, hey, I heard SharePoint's like the thing to do right now. If you do that, you need to have some familiarity with SQL Server because it sits on top of SQL Server, and already explained to you that your MDF files, your data files, your LDF files, your log files, and your backups for that SQL Server installation are all going to the C drive. You and yourself, if you do that spousal installation, are creating yourself an RPE, a resume producing event. And we have to perform some sort of backups. So what we'll do is we'll use a SQL Server Database Maintenance Wizard. That is a very accurate wizard, very granular wizard. It allows you to choose what files you want to back up, what databases specifically, where you want them backed up, how long you want them retained, any data allocation or any data repairs that you want to do, any logs that you want, any log reports that you want to create, all of that can be determined through this maintenance wizard. We can actually create jobs to perform backups manually if you want to do that. Instead of using the wizards, we have that option as well. We need to specify the location of the backups. Often people say, well, okay, I don't have it on the C drive, but I have it on the M drive, like I just showed you with my VMware image here. Okay, that's great. The other option is, well, I don't have it on the same server, because people say, well, dude, it's on the same server. If you lose a server, you've lost everything. Some people, okay, I've got it on a server, but it's sitting right next door to the production server. But I got my backup server available, and it's sitting right next to my backup server, sitting right next to just next door to my production server. Well, if we're in the computer room, we'll call it, and the sprinklers go off, you've lost both of your servers. So one of the things I strongly suggest when you look at location of backups is have one readily available, not on the C drive, not on the same server, preferably not in the same room, but okay to be in the same building because they'll be connected with a high-speed LAN. But in addition to that, I also want a copy of that backup somewhere else in the world. That's where it goes back to the Azure Backup. I can store a copy of my backup locally for quick recovery, but for locally, like I said, same machine. If you live in Tornado Valley, Midwest, it could take out a couple blocks up there. So even having a couple machine or a couple buildings down may not be sufficient. The West Coast, you've got earthquakes over there. Having it in the same city may not be sufficient. So you have to have really 3 copies of data: your production, a locally readily available high-speed connected copy of it, and then who cares where it is as long as I have a 3rd copy somewhere. And the Azure Backup is a great option for you, and you can pick literally anywhere in the world that you want to store that information. With that said, a lot of the problems that we have with SQL Server is the idea of ginormous transaction logs. And if you look this up online, that means every database has an MDF and an LDF file. If you look this up online, people are going to say, just put your databases in simple recovery model. If you can't see that, no, it's in red and it's in multiple exclamation points because I don't want you doing that. Let's take a look at why. So let me help you understand what SQL Server transaction logs are all about. Anytime you make a modification to a list or to a library in SharePoint, that modifications, is going to be checked by SQL Server to see if that data exists in what's called the buffer cache or the data cache. As you know, everything works faster if it's in cache. So it's going to see if it's already there. If it's not already there, it's going to go out to SQL Server. It's going to go into the database. It's going to go into the table, and it's going to load that information that you're trying to modify in SharePoint into that buffer cache. Then what it's going to do is going to take the change that you made and it's going to add it to the LDF file. Remember I said every database has an MDF file, their data file, and then has an LDF file, which is your transaction log. Anytime you do an insert, an update, or delete, it doesn't go right to the MDF file. It actually makes a record of that or records that transaction, as it's called, into that LDF file. And then a little bit later on, we'll say every 60 seconds, there's a process built into SQL Server called checkpoint. It's going to go ahead and look at, it's going to go back, it's going to view the information in the LDF file and see what's come in since the last time the checkpoint ran. Anything that's come in from the last time, that's a completed transaction, because a transaction could be 500 inserts. Well, maybe it's only done 450 of them. So that's not a completed transaction. So to ignore that transaction until the next time the checkpoint runs, until all 500 have been written or deleted or updated. So this is how this works. Check the buffer cache to see if it exists. If not, or load it in. Third, then it's going to write the insert, the update, delete to the LDF file. When about 60 seconds later, we'll say this built-in process called checkpoint will write those dirty pages. They're dirty because they haven't been written to the MDF file to the database. Now, the simple recovery model I showed you on 2 slides ago. If you look this up online, if you want to avoid ginormous transaction logs, it will fix the problem, but it'll be creating a completely different problem. What's going to happen here is the modification sent to SQL Server. It's going to either read the content from the buffer cache or it's going to load it. It's going to modify the transaction. It's going to put the modification in the transaction log. And then with simple recovery model, when it writes from the LDF file to the MDF file, it's going to flush the transaction log. Okay, will this fix the ginormous transaction logs? Yes, but it's going to introduce a completely different problem. So this is what we're going to do here. I don't want you to use simple recovery model in your production databases because you won't be able to do a data recovery, which I'll talk about in a couple more minutes here in much more detail. The other option, and the default option, is to leave it in full recovery model. This slide is pretty much the same, except for the red print where it says flushes on the previous slide. This is going to retain the transaction logs. Your production databases should be in full recovery model. If you are not familiar with your DBA, if you're not familiar with this process or how they're working with it, take that person out to lunch and find out what they're using for a recovery model, is all it's called, and make sure they're not using simple recovery, because that would be, again, for them, it would be an RPE, a resume producing event, but it wouldn't make you look any good. It, may not make you look as good because the data was lost, even though it's not ultimately your fault. So the difference between simple or full is the fact that the LDF never gets flushed if it's in a full recovery model. Hence the reason the LDF file continues to grow. So how do we avoid this? Here's our situation. What we're going to do, and the DBA is doing this, you're just going to have a conversation. By the way, if you don't know your DBA, find out who they are and meet with them monthly. At the least, take them to lunch and find out what's going on. You'll be surprised how much you can learn and how much they can learn from you about the database requirements for SharePoint. A lot of them just throw, oh, just go use that instance of SQL Server we have hanging out there. You need your own instance. I got an entire different session on that. You need your own instance of SQL Server here. All right, DBA, he's going to be doing, or she's going to be doing a backup, full backup on Sunday night. And then on Monday night, they're going to do just the changes. So let's say Sunday night, we have a 60 gigabyte database. Sunday night is going to back up all 60. Monday, we come in, the users make some changes in the list and the libraries in SharePoint, 5 gigs of changes. So Monday, it's going to just back up those 5 gigs of changes. Tuesday, they make 3 more gigs of changes in between the list and libraries. Differential, another word, is also accumulative. So what they're going to do is on Tuesday, it's going to back up the 5 gigs from Monday and then the 3 gigs from Tuesday. Wednesday, we're going to do 2 more gigs. We're going to keep the math easy for me. Tuesdays or Wednesdays differential is going to be the 5 from Monday, the 3 from Tuesday, the 2 from Wednesday. Now we're up to 10 gigs. Still better than 60, but that's why we're going to do that backup. Okay. Now what's going to happen here? We're going to come in on Thursday. Thursday at 4 p.m. Our MDF database disk drive goes up in flames. It's up in flames and smoke. Now, if I'm in simple recovery model, this LDF file is completely empty. There's nothing I can do. So which means all of my transactions for Thursday are toast. They're gone. So, but if I'm in full recovery model, all my transactions for Thursday are there. At this point, because I'm not in simple recovery model, I'm going to be able to salvage all of my transactions right up to 4 p.m. So how do we do this? What we need to do is we need to first back up the LDF file because that still contains all my transactions that took place on Thursday. Just dump it anywhere. I'm just dumping this to as the SQL Backups, temp backup.bak. With no recovery, just says to SQL Server, dude, I'm going to be doing more recoveries, so don't bring the database back online yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to back up the transactions from Thursday from that LDF file using step number 1. Step number 2 is we're going to go back to our full database backup from Sunday, and we're going to start a restore process. We're going to restore the full database backup from Sunday. Then, because we've been doing cumulative / differentials, we're going to restore our differential backup from Wednesday. Your backup strategy should be driven by your restore strategy. You want to minimize the downtime. So when I do a full backup on Sunday, now I don't have to do a restore Monday and then one Tuesday and then one Wednesday, because Wednesday's got all of the transactions or all the backups from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in there. So I'm going to next restore the differential backup from Wednesday. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to restore the transactions that we just backed up previously in step 1. We're going to restore that. So this is my proof to you that you don't want to put a production database in simple recovery model, and make sure your DBA is aware of that, because I wouldn't be able to do steps 1 and 4, which means I would lose all my transactions on Thursday if I was in simple recovery model. So how do I avoid the ginormous transaction logs? When's the best time to purge out this LDF file that's associated with the database? At some point in time, and this is what happens, people never do a backup of the LDF file. The best point in time for me to do a backup of the LDF file is right after I did my full backup on Sunday. Because right now I've got my production database. I have an exact copy of it on my local drive, yet to be my 3rd copy up in the cloud somewhere. But right now, I don't need what's in this transaction log on Sunday night, the LDF file, because I have a copy of it right now. And it's exact copy of what we have in production. So at that point, they're going to add, and this is a job, they can create a job. Step number 2 is if step 1, which is where I did a fullback, if that's successful, then backup log database name to, I don't care where you dump it, with initialize. Because all we're doing with this backup log statement, that's what's missing. That's where you get the ginormous transaction logs. All you're doing with that is you're purging out the LDF file. I don't really need it because I already have a copy of the backup. I already have the backup copy I just created, and I'm going to quickly send, and shortly I'm going to be sending that off to the cloud. And with the init just said next week, if you run this, just clobber what's in there last week. So those are the steps that we would use for avoiding ginormous transaction logs without going into simple recovery model. One last piece on recovery information. These are some additional settings that you need to be aware of, because we're making changes throughout our entire environment regarding our backups, your application pool account passwords, timeout settings, IPsec settings, SSL certificates, any specific DNS entries, RIS entries, any dedicated IP addresses. All of that needs to be documented somewhere. That's going to be, if you lose the entire farm, that's going to be the part that's going to be necessary for you to create that information. Okay, so high availability, we'll have these slides available to you. We won't have time to get into that. I apologize for the late start. I hope this information was helpful for you. Again, my name is Brian Alderman. My Twitter handle is Brian Alderman, all one word, no dots, periods, or dashes, or anything like that. And I appreciate you joining us in this unprecedented delivery format. It's been very interesting for most of us as speakers, and great job to all of the organizers that have been working with us. And thank you for joining us in this Microsoft 365 collaboration conference.